Okay, I got asked about books recently, so here we go. This is a quick and dirty book review of a bunch. I've got a pile of books here. I'm just going to run through them. If you like one, I can do a separate video of a book review of that particular one. Let's see what happens. So the question was leadership books, and then that was yesterday, leadership in design books. And then today the question was, what about fiction? How is fiction useful and helpful? So I'm going to start with fiction, do some other stuff, and then end with fiction. So here are the classics on dystopias. So the future gone wrong. We're kind of living that nightmare at the moment, but here they are. You've got Brave New World, Huxley. You've got 1984, George Orwell, and you've got Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. They're all really similar in that the world's gone terrible because of technology and people controlling everything, and they're worth a read. They're amazing. Do read them. Okay, I'll move that one aside. Okay, starting with that. Then okay, let's look at just some really classic sort of standardy books about leadership and so forth. Many years ago, 20 years ago, I was trying to grow and whatever, and I came across the one minute manager series. This isn't the first one that I read. This is building high performing teams, but I really like it. It's sort of dialogue based. They're small and digestible. The guy goes on a bit of a journey trying to understand himself and how to manage teams and whatever. But that one I thought was really interesting and quite useful at the time for me. Later on, I did a self-paced MBA, and getting to yes was part of that. And this is about negotiating and it not being adversarial. You really need to understand motivations and so forth. And I thought that was interesting because we're not always just negotiating terms of a contract, for example. We're negotiating how to work together and all these sorts of things. So that one's really interesting and maybe worth a look. How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a classic one. I think for leadership, relationships is the key thing. So this is indispensable and still really, really relevant. Five Dysfunctions of a Team. This one, this Lencioni guy has a few other books in the series, and they're all worth having a look at. This one basically talks about the five elements required for a team to be functional. I think it probably a team of two might apply to as well. So, and I found this to be really practical and really interesting. It's told as an allegory. We all love allegories. And it's got a pyramid type graphic, so it's really easy to follow along what's going on. Okay, now a bit more, not technical, but a bit more academic now. I really love, you can't see any of the cover here because I've got stuff all over it. Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. This one talks about how to understand complex systems. Humans interact with and are complex systems. I think if you can really understand what's going on here, you'll have better relationships in teams and with people. And this not only applies to people, but and it's not even primarily to people, it's primarily applying to systems out there, but humans are the most complex and weird systems around. So if I were going to prioritize, I'd say probably one of the dystopian future novels and one of these, maybe. Reinventing Organizations. If you're going to lead your organization to a better place, be gone with all of the old management style, be gone with all of that bad structure. This will help you get there. And there's a few elements to that. It basically talks about self-management and whole person. So it's very human focused. Sense making and the organization. This is thick. It's 500 pages of dense action, very academic. But this Wyke guy, Wyke, is a dry humor guy. Like he does some really hardcore backhanders in this book, and they're dry but hilarious. Basically talking about how do, and when it says organization, it means anything that is organized. So it can be a company or a relationship or whatever. But it's generally speaking about large complex systems that are people organized. How do we understand what's going on? How do we act? All of that sort of stuff. Most of it can be abstracted out to leadership, and it can also be applicable to designing products or org design or any of that sort of stuff. But that's hard reading, like deep, like hardcore reading. Okay, now for something a little bit different. These two were purchased for me a long time ago as a bit of a gift, and they're kind of inspiring little, quippy little things. They're kind of focused on the creative industry a bit more than what I do now, but they were very, very useful to help me think differently and basically dispense with some of the bad ideas about self and who I want to be. And these were a good prompt for that. So that one's kind of nice. And that one's kind of nice as well. It's all the classic stuff about being creative in a advertising agency, or be different and throw away the shackles and probably, hone your personality and your voice and all of those sorts of things. This is probably the book that I go on about the most, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And this is really an allegory about a guy who rides a motorcycle across the country with his son, who shits himself a lot of the times in the woods. That's weird. But essentially he's bringing together the logical, rational world and the passionate, emotive, romantic world in one person, and describing how they come together and support each other. And from a leadership and self-understanding point of view, that's really a great thing. Oh, and at the end, when Chris, the son, is able to stand up on the back of the motorcycle while they're riding along and look over his father's shoulders. What a moment in the book. So I would say read this one and enjoy. The Inner Game of Tennis. This one is not about tennis. It is about tennis, but it's not. It's basically talking about how to get into a state of flow when trying to solve or do a thing or build skill. So it talks about, in the context of tennis, but it could be playing a musical instrument, writing code, designing, understanding, doing research, whatever it is. It's short enough to get through fairly easily. And it really talks about the two selves, the physical self and the I think the outer self and the inner self. I can't remember now, but about quietening them down and getting them to align to one another. That one's a really strong recommendation too. Okay. You want us to keep going on the esoteric tip? Alan Watts. There's two. There's the book and the Wisdom of Insecurity. Alan Watts is a guy who was a pastor or something, then went to the East and became a full-blown Buddhist, understand and got to know the Zen way and all of the Eastern ways, and came back and kind of resolved it for average white folk like me. Great book, basically talking about, well, what's the point of anything? You're part of the universe. You're like a wave lapping on the beach. Why are you fighting with everyone? Those are really strong, but they do, if you haven't thought of who you are and what it means to be you, they can be a little bit confronting, but it's not aggressive or anything like that. So that one's another strong recommendation. Now we're getting a really religious. I'm not a religious person, and I don't care much for the Bible in the way that people interpret its meaning and take it too far. But this book here is called The New Man. It talks about, goes through and analyzes and decomposes a little bit all of the parables of Jesus. And a lot of those stories that he's telling is not the literal words about turning water into wine or stone and other things. He's really talking about a person being the literal act of living, and then going to a higher quality level of living, and then an even further abstract level where they can reflect on the bottom two. There's kind of those three levels. And it unpacks the meaning of a lot of those parables, which are fantastic about to help you on your way. And that works as a person and maybe as something you can do with others if you're becoming a leader of people. And then the last one is the weirdest one. This is fiction and also, I think, a self-help and self-journey book. It's told as an allegory. This is Carlos Castaneda's Tales of Power. This was written in the 70s. He was an anthropologist and went down to Mexico and hung out with this shaman guy and took all these drugs, and all this weird shit happened. And it's just an amazing breakdown of that time. And just the one, let me just read one thing. Doesn't matter what one reads. The average man seeks certainty in the eyes of the onlooker and calls that self-confidence. The warrior seeks impeccability in his own eyes and calls that humbleness. Need I say more?